As we record this, it's somewhere out there, somewhere down there. We don't know where it is. But the question is, what are we obligated to do about it? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, there is a submersible, kind of like a little submarine, that has gone down for basically a tourist visit to the wreck of the Titanic at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And after about an hour and 45 minutes, they lost contact with the submersible from the ship that's on the surface. And as we record this, they have not yet located the 5 people who are in that submersible down there somewhere. Gentlemen, I watched a little bit of the Coast Guard's most recent news conference, and it was just a series of media questions followed by the Coast Guard official saying, "We just don't know. We don't know. I'm sorry, we don't know." And he tried to impress it upon people that this isn't something that's just off the coast of Massachusetts, for example, that this is, 900 miles out there and more than 13,000 feet deep in the ocean.
And 372 miles off of Greenland or something.
372, like from Greenland? Okay. So it is way out there and it is way down there. And what it made me think of, Stephen Green, is a broader question, not the specifics of this incident or how the submersible had the problem or, all that kind of stuff. But when I saw the Coast Guard moving heaven and earth trying to find this thing, it made me wonder, what is the U.S. Coast Guard, and by extension, what are we obligated to do to rescue people who are lost at sea far off the coast of the United States because of either a motive of fun or profit? What are we obligated to do in terms of expending money, in terms of accepting risks on behalf of this adventure to try to save these 5 people? Steve, what are your thoughts on that?
I have a couple of thoughts on this. What we're obligated to do is nothing. What should we do? A lot. It doesn't make sense probably on any kind of fiscal math when the little kid gets trapped in the well to move heaven and earth to save one little kid and put various emergency workers at new risk to pull the kid out of the well or whatever the situation would be. But
Steve, let me stop you there for a second, because this is a different situation. This isn't a little kid that fell in a well. This is some wealthy people who are going on an adventure by their own volition, who put themselves into harm's way out there.
Yes.
And now we're going and trying to rescue them.
I live in Colorado. We have a lot of hikers. We also have a lot of stupid people. And every year somebody gets lost on a mountain. They did that of their own will. They were grown-up people, and guess what? We send people out every time to try and find those lost hikers. It doesn't always work. We try every single time. And there is a need, I suppose, in us, at least in somewhat decent people. And I think it encourages the risk-taking that people need to advance as not just as individuals, but as cultures, as societies, as countries. That there's a knowledge that if you're going to do this thing, that somebody's going to have your back. And right now what I'm finding out is, they're 13,000 feet deep. The Navy says, quite frankly, we don't have anything equipped to go that deep to rescue them. Apparently, I don't know all the details on this. I just read a quick news item about it on PJ Media Tuesday morning. There's a vessel in Britain, I think it's an Anglo-French vessel, that has a tow hook. It can go down that deep. And because you can't transfer anybody out of that submersible at that depth,
no.
This is a submersible that can go that deep, that has a tow hook, that could conceivably make a rescue attempt if there's anybody alive to rescue. And we've said no to this. The Brits are saying, we've got this thing, just give us the call. They've got their crew ready to go, and we've said no, or we haven't answered at this point.
Who said no?
I don't. I would have to look that up, and I'll tell you what, Bill. When you get to your part, I will scooch
I'm sorry,
over and look that up.
I find that almost impossible to believe.
And get back to you on that. But the idea that we don't try to help adventurers when they get in trouble, I think, is bad for the species. It's the people who push those boundaries, or the people like them, that pull us all forward. And even if, yes, it's just a tourism thing, it's not just a tourism thing. There is something special, there's something daring about doing what used to be impossible, about going down to 13,000 feet to see a cruise ship that was supposed to be unsinkable. There's almost a magic there. And without magic, without adventure, what's the point?
Bill Whittle, in a sense, Steve pointed out a good example of the hikers in the mountains. I also thought about people who build their homes in danger zones, basically along earthquake faults, on the coast where hurricanes are frequent, in floodplains and places like that. And it seems like when you do that, as the individual taking that action, getting into that submersible, you have, in essence, obligated the whole country, in this case, several countries, to be your rescuer should things go wrong. And now, at the way it looks now, at this moment as we're recording this, they've got like a day and a half worth of oxygen left in that thing at best, if they're in there, if it's even still an active thing. But isn't there something that is just morally wrong about obligating other people because you want to do something that is edgy, risky, dangerous, and you haven't put in place the safety mechanisms or the rescue mechanisms yourself to take care of that exigency?
Well, first of all, I'd like to answer the question you asked Steve. What do you do to save? How far do you go? What do you do to save people who are in distress like that? And I have a real simple answer for that, and that's everything. You do everything. You do everything you have in the box. The argument that these people are somehow culpable or whatever because they're wealthy or because they're doing something dangerous. Look, if I take a Sea-Doo, if I take a jet ski out into Biscayne Bay and I'm in trouble, then the Coast Guard is going to come and try and save me. And if they send a helicopter out to save me, they will. If I get lost at sea, just pushing off the shore from Key Biscayne or something like that, then the Coast Guard will come looking for me, and they'll send everything that the Coast Guard has to find me, because that's what civilized societies do. The entire idea of this is that for some brief moment in time, we're no longer talking about statistics. We're talking about actual people now who are in mortal peril. And I want to live in a society, and I'm extremely proud to live in a society that will not worry about the dollar amount and on a large, and this is, I suppose, is difficult for some people. I think for most people, it just doesn't even bear thinking about. And if you have to risk 20 lives or 50 lives or 100 lives to save that person, then you risk them. Those are not, I'm not saying you kill them, I'm saying you risk them, right? This is what humanity's supposed to be about, and it is certainly what America's all about. One of the things that's most appalling about the Ukraine war is just how many dead and even wounded the Russians are leaving on the battlefield. And certainly the U.S. and especially the Marines have a policy that we do not leave our men behind. If they're dead, that might be changing the equation a little bit, but nobody gets left behind. And that's why the Marines are such an effective fighting force. It's because they know that somebody is going to come for them if they get into trouble.
Yeah, but that's people who have taken an oath, Bill. That's people who are brothers in arms.
But
that's
people who are
decided
doing the rescuing
to engage in a common mission. I didn't sign anything that said, "Hey, hot dog out in the middle of the ocean trying to dive on the Titanic. If you get in trouble, I'd be glad to pitch into the kitty to rescue you. In fact, I'd be glad to risk my son's life if he was in the Coast Guard in order to get you out of there."
On the contrary, you may not have signed that document, but anybody who joined the Coast Guard signed that document. The second they enlisted in the Coast Guard, they signed that document. The second they enlisted in the Coast Guard, they basically made an agreement with society that says, I will risk and perhaps give my life in order to save people in distress, and I'm not going to sit in the ready room with the helicopter crew trying to decide whether these people are worthy of rescuing or not. This is the entire point of a civilized society, and this is the entire point of getting away from this entire safe space thing. There are people, mostly young men, almost exclusively young men, but not completely, so I want to be clear on that, who fully understand the risks and who have dedicated their lives to saving people's lives at sea, in the mountains, or whatever. It's not a question of what the people on the submarine did. It's a question of what the people who enlisted in the Coast Guard did. That's the issue. Those people did make that exact bargain that you just talked about. They fully, consciously, willingly made an agreement to risk their lives to save other people. And this is the difference between us and collectivist societies. When I did the Cold War series, I was talking about nuclear submarines, and Sabi has a lot to do with this. The first Soviet nuclear submarine, the Nautilus, served for 20 years without a single accident. We haven't had a single accident in our nuclear navy where guys are traveling around the world in nuclear-powered pressurized tubes. But the very first Soviet nuclear sub killed something like 48 of its crew members over the course of its life. They didn't care. They wanted the prestige and didn't care how many people died to get it. We don't think that way. We are a nation of individualists. There are 5 individuals who need our help, and we will give them the help, and we'll give them all the help we have in the box until we either rescue them or we recover them. And I personally find this to be maybe the single greatest psychological benefit, and certainly the thing I'm proudest of as an American, is the idea that we will go to every length possible to save our people. And this is the most noble thing that you can do.
Thank you. That's the word I couldn't come up with when it was my turn. And when you were speaking, Bill, nobility is the word that popped into my mind, and that's something we need more of, not less of.
The thing that's most important about this, and the reason it's noble, is because it's non-coercive, right? If we were ordering people at gunpoint to go down into other submarines looking for this people, this would be an entirely different situation, but it's not. Right? These are volunteers. We have an all-volunteer military, an all-volunteer Coast Guard. The people who are trying to save these people are all volunteers. And Steve, I was going to say, that I was shocked to hear that we turned down help, because I was about to say that when the Soviets lost the Kursk, there were at least 30 men still alive. Might have been something somewhere around that number, and possibly could have been saved. They were nowhere near as deep as the Titanic, but the United States Navy and the Royal Navy and the Norwegians offered help to the Russians, and the Russians declined out of pride. And I could not imagine the United States ever saying no to that. If somebody were to say we've lost American sailors in a submarine, and the British or the Russians, for that matter, are in position to rescue the crew, we would say absolutely we can use all the help we can get.
I found that story that I mentioned earlier. So a team from Deepwater Specialists, Magellan Limited, has been waiting to leave an airport in the Channel Islands since 7 p.m. on Monday, but approval for takeoff is yet to be received. The Guernsey-based firm produced the first full-size digital scan of the Titanic last summer. You may have seen those.
It's amazing.
They were amazing. And they said the company has essential equipment and expertise to help locate OceanGate's Titan submersible that went missing. But the U.S. government, that's all the story says, the U.S. government has said no. And that's as much detail as I can give you.
Well,
and frankly, Bill, we don't have enough detail on what's going on there. I was just going to say, unless we have some very, very sophisticated, highly classified assets at work.
That could be the case.
If it turns out that is not the case, and we declined help, then that is another signal of how far this country has fallen, and that is a cancer that has got to be.
And I think that's getting way out ahead of the facts. So, if that were the case, yes, but I don't think that's such a shaky little bit of information that I don't think we should draw conclusions based on that. We don't know.
Okay, well, if somebody said the U.S. government said, no, thank you, we don't need your help, based on that sentence, I find that to be extraordinarily disgraceful.
Well, one of the things that both Bill and Steve talked about was the fact that it's a characteristic of those of us in the United States to want to rescue our people. One of the things I think is interesting about this case is I don't even know who these people are. In fact, I think I've heard hints that they're not necessarily our people in the sense that they're not all from the United States, several from other countries. And what it means really is that as Americans, we see people as our people. And I think that's an amazing thing. Honestly, if there were 5 people from our biggest international foe right now, let's just take China since they are in the headlines every day, 100 times a day. If it were 5 people from the People's Republic Army of China that had gone down in this thing, we would still be bending all of our efforts to try to save their lives.
Absolutely.
And that's just a phenomenal thing. Should there be more common sense in the world and people not setting themselves into situations where they're inadequately prepared to do risky things? Yes, there should be. Most of the great risky things that we think of in history involved a great deal of planning in advance to minimize the risk. It's different than the hot dog hiker who goes out with a 6-pack of beer on a dangerous elevation, or somebody who just wants to have a nice beach view, so they build their house right in hurricane zone. The risk taking we admire is much more of the breed of people who fly airplanes or rockets or fast cars or whatever, who put a great deal of effort into trying to ensure that they live through the process. On the other hand, there is something in our common humanity when we see somebody who has stumbled into something stupid like this that says, hey, I'm a stumbler too. I make mistakes too. I've done some wacky things in my life that could have put me or others in jeopardy. And man, if that happens to me, I sure hope somebody comes and gets me. And I think that is at the same time both kind of a comment on our human fallibility as well as our arms outstretched humanity that says, hey, fellow idiot, we're there to rescue you as you, we hope, would be there to rescue us. At the moment we record this, we don't know how this case resolves, and that's why I wanted to talk about it now, because we really don't know all the details of the situation. But I marveled at how this story has captured the world, and that there are 5 people out of 7 billion plus who are in a little metal tube somewhere in the North Atlantic, and we care. And we want them to come back alive, and we hope that they survive, and we're spending millions of dollars trying to ensure that that happens. And that, my friends, should give us as much hope as anything I've heard lately in the future of humanity, that we didn't just say, hey, sorry, pal, you're bad. Better luck next time, which there won't be. I'm greatly encouraged by the state of humanity, not only in the United States, but around the world, by the people who are now desperately trying to rescue 5 people they don't know from this kind of a fate. And I pray that they will be successful at it. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.